Hello dear learners, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we will be seeing a simple example on Spring MVC. This example is right now going to talk about only view and controller. That is, in this example, we will be creating a controller and some views which will coordinate with each other and create a whole example. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, what we'll be doing is we'll say File, New, and we'll be creating a Maven project. Here we will say next. We will not select anything here and we'll say next. And here we will be selecting a web app type application. And then we will say next. And here we will say the package is going to be com.learning and this is going to be a view controller example is how we will name this. And we will say finish. So here you can see our project has got created and this is our basic project. As you can see, the entire project has got created, but then there are still some errors here. This is because of the version that Maven supports and the Eclipse version that we have. We can correct this by going into pom.xml and adding entries of some properties. So before dependency tag and after URL tag, you need to add this properties tag which talks about the encoding that we are using, which is going to be UTF-8, the Spring version that we are going to use, that is release 5, and we are going to say the compiler version is going to be 8. This talks about the JDK version. So the Maven compiler version source and target is going to be 8. Once that is done, we will be adding certain dependencies. Firstly, we will add a Spring dependency. So this is the Spring core dependency. This Spring version that you see comes from here, that we've added here as a property. So it will always tell that this release is going to be 5.0.0 release. Other dependencies that we need to add are these. So here you can see I have added a lot of dependencies. Spring core we already had. Then we added for Spring context, Spring AOP, Aspect-J Weaver, Spring Web MVC, Spring Web, JSTL for JSP pages, Commons logging for the logging purpose, and Java Servlet API again for our view pages. In case if you want this particular whole pom.xml, please mention that in the comments and I'll share this file with you. So these are going to be the various dependencies that we need. Once you have added all these dependencies, you can see the error here has gone because we added the version of JDK here, that is 8. Because of that, primarily the error has gone. So that is needed. Once all this is done, the next thing that we need to do is we need to go in src main web app, web-inf and open our web.xml because that is the next thing that we need to configure. The first thing that we need to do is we need to change this particular tag, the web app tag that we have, the doc type and the web app tag, because this is going to be an older version. So we will just change this web app tag to this particular web app tag. Again, if you can see here, we will also have to remove this particular thing from it, the doc type. So as you can see here, we have changed the version to 3.1 and we are referring to a separate XST file and the location is also different. This is needed because we are using an earlier version, whereas the Maven that is supported here or the Maven that is installed in this particular Eclipse supports an older version. That is why we are just improving it into a newer version or a higher version. That is why you just need this. Once this is done, the next tag that you need to do is absolute ordering and you need to just add this particular tag, absolute ordering tag. Once that is added, we need to add a servlet tag for the dispatcher servlet. So we'll say servlet. Inside the servlet tag, we will have a display name. If you want, you can have this. If you don't want, you can skip this. So here basically, sorry for that, I'll write Spring here. And inside that, I'll say servlet name, and here also I'll say Spring. Again, as I said, display name is optional. You want, you can have it. You want, you can skip it. Then we will need servlet class. Here, basically, we need to mention the path of the dispatcher servlet. So how to get that? There's a way to get it. You can go to Java resources, libraries, Maven dependencies. Then you can go to Spring Web MVC and or Spring Framework Web Servlet. Here is where you find the dispatcher servlet. So this is basically the path that you need. You can just copy that path here. You can say org dot spring framework, sorry my bad, org dot spring framework dot web dot servlet dot dispatcher servlet. So this is what you mention. After this, you need a servlet mapping tag. So servlet mapping. Inside this, again, we will have a servlet name tag. So you can mention that here, same as before. And you will have a URL pattern wherein we'll just mention a slash. So this is what you need to configure in the web.xml file. You need an absolute ordering tag, you need servlet, and you need servlet mapping tag, right? Once this is done, what we need to do next is we need to go to our webinf, right click and say new and say XML file, other and XML file. And this is going to be spring hyphen servlet dot XML file inside the webinf folder. Now this is going to be our web configuration file and we need to make an entry for it here in the XML. So what we can do here is we can have a init param and inside this we can say the param name tag and the param value tag. These are the two tags that we need inside this. Okay. In the param name tag, we will say this is our context config location is the name of the parameter, and for the param value we will mention the path. So we will say slash web hyphen inf hyphen inf slash we need to say spring servlet. Now this name could be anything. It could be spring servlet, it could be web config, any file. It could be spring config or it could be REST servlet, whatever you want. The choice is yours. We have already discussed this in some previous videos. You can check out those videos here. I'll link them up and you can see how this whole XML file is configured. This as well as the next file that we are talking about, that is the spring servlet file. So this can be any name, as I have mentioned earlier also in my previous videos. You just need to make sure that the path is correct. That is, it needs to be inside webinf and the name of the file has to be XML file. Once this is done, one more thing that we need to do is we need to call a tag called as load on startup and set it to 1 so that dispatcher servlet gets called first. That's the first thing that needs to get called. So that is why we'll say load on startup 1. So this will get called the first thing. The next thing that we configure is spring servlet.xml. Again, in this file there is a lot of configuration. So what I'll do is I'll just copy all the configuration here. I'll explain you everything, and then if you want you can mention that in the comment section and I'll share this file with you, right? So that is what we'll be doing here. So let's go ahead and mention all the configuration here. So let's paste it. So I have pasted it. I will just remove this one line because it's duplicate. So as you can see here that we are adding that same XML tag is there still. The beans tag is an important tag for us because that's the root tag for this XML file in which we are mentioning various schemas, that is the beans schema, the XML context schema, then the MVC schema. These are some important ones for us, the beans, the context and the MVC, which we'll be using here also. Also important tag for us is context component scan. Here usually we will mention the package of our files where the Spring needs to look for our controller files, or later on when we'll add service files, all that you need to mention here. So what you can do here is you can mention the basemost package here. As of now, I'm saying com.learning.controller here. Beyond that, I have an MVC annotation driven tag here because I'll be using quite some annotations in my code. So this is for the conversion, etc. I'm using that tag here to tell that it is going to be annotation driven. Also, a very important tag for us is this particular bean, which talks about the internal resource view resolver. We've already spoken about this in our previous video. Sorry, my bad. And here basically we mention the path of our JSP files where they'll be located and the extension. Here we are mentioning JSP because that is what we are going to use. This could be some other file also, but as of now this is going to be JSP file. So inside webinf, inside view folder, we'll have JSP files. So that is what we've mentioned here. So 3 important tags: component scan, which tells the base package where it will look for the controller files. Annotation driven to tell that we will be using annotations in our code. And internal resource view resolver to tell the location of the view files, which is JSP pages in this case. So this is going to be there. Again, this is the most basic configuration that we need for this code to work. There will be more configurations that will come in when we talk about databases or any other sort of additions that we want in this particular code, and accordingly those things will keep adding. Okay, so we will need those. Once that is done, the next thing that we need to do is we need to basically create this particular package and create a controller inside it. So we'll right click on Java resources, new, and we'll say class, and let's name this as view controller. You can name it as whatever you want. The package needs to be, of course, this that we've mentioned. So it needs to be com.learning.controller. Okay, because that's what we've mentioned here. So it needs to be that. And then we say finish. Once this is done, what we do is we add a controller annotation here to tell that this is going to be a controller. So we just need to import this. It will come here because we've already imported those libraries. Once this is done, we need to mention some methods here. These are going to be our methods that will contain the request mapping tag, and this is where the code will actually come, or this is the actual location where our request will be redirected, and it will redirect us to some JSP pages. So we will simply say public void hello method. Okay, hello method. And here, as of now, we will not take any arguments. And inside this method, we will say, as of now, we are keeping it very simple because this is just the first program that we are writing. So we'll simply say return, and we'll mention the name of the view page. So here, this is going to be home.jsp. Again, I've made a mistake here. This has to be string because we need to return the view name. So what it will do is it will take up this home, and inside webinf view folder, it will try to look for a home.jsp because that's what we mentioned here. That is, inside webinf there will be a view folder, and inside view folder there will be a home.jsp. One more thing that we need to do is we need to add a request mapping tag. So if you say control space, you will get that, and inside this you can mention a path. So you can say /home here. That is where it will go, the home page. Correct? So that is what you need to say here. Again, you can use your index.jsp to redirect it to a home page. So you can say anchor tag here, href is equals to, you can say home, and you can say home page. Okay, so this will redirect you to the home page. And inside webinf folder, we need to create a folder that is view. So we'll right click on webinf, say new folder, and say view, and view dot, so we'll just say view because that's a folder, and inside this we'll say right click, new, and JSP file, and we'll name this as home.jsp and say finish. So you have this home page, and we can simply have an h1 tag here that says welcome to home page, and save. Once this is done, what we can do is just right click on our index.jsp maybe, or also on your project, and you can just run your project. So we'll just right click, and we'll say run as, and we'll say run on server, and we'll say finish. So this opens up our home page or our index.jsp, wherein we have this home page tag. If you can see here at the bottom, you can see it is showing us view controller home.view controller example /home. So it will take us to the home page, and we click on this, it takes us to the home page wherein we had said welcome to home page. That was the basic thing that we had written. So this is a very basic example wherein we are creating a controller. As you can see, we had form.xml wherein we configured the compiler and the Spring version. We added a lot of Spring libraries Beyond that, we added the JSP libraries, logging libraries, servlet libraries. Then we configured web.xml, wherein we configured the dispatches servlet and the path for our Spring configuration file. This again, as I said earlier, could be anything that you want. Once that was done, we configured our Spring servlet and we configured the base package here, com.learning.controller. Then annotation driven tag to tell that we're going to use annotations in this code. And we configured the internal resource view resolver for our view pages. So we defined the path for the view pages and the extension of the view page. Once that was done, then we created our controller, that is our view controller, and we mentioned the various request mapping methods here. Again, make sure that when you're creating this controller folder, it has to be inside src main Java. In case if you don't have this folder, please go ahead and create a Java folder and add it into it. Otherwise, your code won't work. It has to be inside Java folder. So just make sure that as a check. Once that is done, we added this request mapping home and we mentioned the name of the JSP file is going to be home. Then in our main and web app, we created a folder inside WebINF, that is view, and added the home.jsp there, wherein we just mentioned welcome to home page. And in our first page, that is index.jsp, we added a link that redirected us to the home page. So this was an overall summary of the code that we wrote. In case if you have any questions, you can get back to me in the comments section. You can even mention your questions in my Telegram group, and you can ask questions in case if you get stuck anywhere or your code is not working because of any reason. You can ping me and I'll try to answer your questions. So that is it for today. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a nice week ahead.